Well, I want to welcome all of you to All Souls Church Unitarian and to this historic event as we mark the 75th anniversary of the U.S. atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. My name is Reverend Kathleen Rolenz, and I am serving as the interim senior minister here at All Souls, along with my colleague, Reverend Rob Keithan and Reverend Louise Green. I want to honor and recognize the fact that this church has been intimately involved in this commemoration for many, many years, and to acknowledge that our reason for gathering tonight is clear. We gather to mourn and to remember, and that to avoid repeating the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we must keep the memory of that alive. So this is a solemn occasion as we remember the lives lost and the trauma which still reverberates in and amongst us today from this act of violence. So it is in the spirit of repentance and reconciliation that I invite you now into this time of spirit reflection, meditation, and prayer, as is your practice. Please join me. O Spirit of life, known by many names and yet beyond all naming, be with us now in this time of remembrance and hope. We bow our heads and pause in remembrance, understanding that the use of nuclear weapons represents a failure of diplomacy, a failure to do the harder work of building relationships, and a failure to create a world in which nuclear weapons are unnecessary. As we remember, we also grieve. We grieve the loss of life, the trauma inflicted, the environmental devastation, and communities forever changed by reckless fear and unchecked power. So we pray first for those lives lost. We pray also for the leaders who have the power to use these weapons, that they will fully comprehend the madness of such an action, and that we, the people, will continue to raise our voices in such a cry of protest that it will be heard.
Who's giving out donations?
To 1600
Who's giving out donations?
Pennsylvania Avenue. We shout no more. We shout no more. So on this anniversary of such a tremendous loss, we also gather with hope that those of us who are here and those of us who are attending events following will continue to stand up for peace, continue to roll with justice, continue to protest, to shout, to demand, and to make good trouble. We insist on a vision of a world made fair and all her people one. So we ask for a blessing upon this gathering and for the promise of peace, and we ask that that promise be kept so that all may have life and have it abundantly. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so.
Thank you, Reverend Kathleen. I'm John Steinbach with the Hiroshima Nagasaki Peace Committee of the National Capital Area, and we've been doing this vigil every year since 1981. And we remember the exact instant of the bombing because Albert Einstein said, in that instant, which is 1 minute from now, in that instant, everything changed except for the way we think, and thus we drift toward unparalleled catastrophe. So I'm going to, everyone should get your candles out. If you don't have a candle, Jim, get a candle over here. They're already wiped. We'll all get together. I'm going to ring the bell 3 times like they do in Hiroshima, the same thing. And then we're going to have 3 minutes of silence like they do there. So if everybody can get ready, I'll get the bell. Also, when we pause, let's keep in our hearts and in our minds thoughts for those that perished in Beirut. Thank you. Thank you very much. So the program is going to be a very simple program. I'm going to speak briefly about why we are here, a little bit about the history of our committee, and then what we're going to do is Rob is going to help take the microphone, pass it around the circle, and so it'll be wiped before each person gets it. So, and then at the point when each of us has spoken, then we will close for the day. So the question is, why should we care 75 years later about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? And the reason is very clear, because as Einstein said, at that point, everything changed. Before Hiroshima and Nagasaki, to destroy a city, you had to build thousands of bombs and hundreds of airplanes, and you had to organize bombing campaigns. And it took a lot of money and it took a lot of time. And with the bombing of Hiroshima and then Nagasaki, it was one bomb equals one city. And this is even before we learned about things like radiation and nuclear winter and so on. So to remember what a crime Hiroshima and Nagasaki were, we need to go back to the planning. So In 1939, Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard talked with Edward Teller and others, and they were concerned that with the knowledge of nuclear fission, theoretical knowledge of nuclear fission, that Adolf Hitler might get the bomb. And so Szilard and Einstein delivered a letter to Roosevelt warning him of this eventuality and recommending the establishment of the Manhattan Project. Both men essentially spent the rest of their lives repenting for having done this. Einstein said, had I known the Nazis would have not built a bomb, quote, I would not have lifted my little finger to help to do this. Leo Szilard, along with the help of Einstein and others, founded the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, Federation of American Scientists, and basically spent the rest of their lives working to first to prevent the nuclear arms race and then working for nuclear disarmament. Szilard delivered also, before the bomb was dropped, organized amongst the scientists at University of Chicago primarily, and got a letter signed by many, many scientists saying, do not drop the bomb on Japan, because at that point it was clear Japan was the target. And in fact, going back and looking at the records, we know that as early 1943, they had basically dismissed the idea of using the bomb against Germany. It was clear Germany didn't have the bomb. So even in early 43, Japan was the target. So the suggestion was, if you're going to use the bomb, use it as a demonstration far, far away so nobody would get injured. There was a committee that was established. It was primarily chaired by Robert Oppenheimer. It was called the Targeting Committee. And the Targeting Committee decided that they would attack 2 Japanese cities that had hitherto not been exposed to the bombing. And their criteria was very clear. The city had to be intact, and it had to be a manufacturing city with a majority of working class people living in working class housing, primarily wood, that would be concentrated. And it was to show how effective the bomb would be. So it was a deliberate decision to commit mass murder against defenseless workers living in wooden houses. And Truman, the day after the bombing, talked about the successful experiment. So we need to understand the bombing as, number one, an experiment directed at living people so they could see how the bomb worked. And of course, this experiment was carried on for the next, up until the present time, through originally something called the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission, where the survivors were studied like guinea pigs. There was an analogous study of the survivors in Rongelap of the first hydrogen explosion in the Marshall Islands. And so the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission, after the bomb, would study. They would bring the Hibakusha in, they would bring the children in from school to study them. But they had a policy that we'll study you, but we will not give any comfort or aid or do any medical procedures, because the formal position was that if the US government provided any kind of medical help, that would imply an apology for using the bomb. And so that continues to this day. And the bomb is still, in the Washington Post, for example, I'd encourage people to go back and to read. There was a story yesterday about American children that were in Hiroshima when the bomb was dropped, American citizens, a story about that, and then a story about bomb testing today. And then you look at the comments, and so many vile, vile comments to this day. and lots of propaganda, the idea that, well, the bomb was justified, it shortened the war, and it saved many American lives. And the historians understand this, that it didn't. I mean, it's not well known, but the Joint Chiefs of Staff unanimously opposed the bombing. Eisenhower, LeMay, who was the chair, Leahy, Curtis LeMay, in charge of the Air Force, and MacArthur, all for their own reasons opposed the bombing. It was a political decision. The historians now are very clear that the reason for the bombing was several-fold. It was to bring the war to an end quickly so as to prevent the Soviet Union from entering the war. So that was their primary objective, is to not to permit the Soviets to be part of the surrender process in Japan. So that was one motivation, but the other two motivations were, one, as a big stick against the Soviet Union, and Truman and his Secretary of State Simpson both talked about this almost incessantly. We got a big stick on Uncle Joe. And the other was a stick against the world. So the US developed the bomb. The scientists said, all right, now we've built the bomb, we've used the bomb, let's share the technology with the Soviet Union and the rest of the world, and let's move quickly for nuclear disarmament. The US government said no. Einstein and other scientists said there is no secret. I mean, it's very simple. It's straightforward physics and technology and industry. And it took the Soviets 4 years, or a little less than 4 years, to build their own bomb. And so the arms race began, and it continued. To this day, we still have approximately 14,000 nuclear weapons. 9 different nations have these weapons. They could be used at any point. A mistake could be made, a miscalculation, a regional conflict erupts, India, Pakistan, Israel, Iran. There's lots of potential things that could happen. So Jim is talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, how close we now know we came to nuclear war, literally minutes, but there are at least 8 or 10 different instances throughout the last 75 years that the world has come within 10 or 15 minutes of nuclear annihilation through computer mistakes, through miscalculations. So so this is why we need to remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those weapons are still there. They are still planned to be used. It's all well and good to say, well, it's a state of mutually assured destruction and nobody's going to use them and no one's going to be crazy enough to use them, except if you look at the United States Nuclear Posture Review over the years. To this day, the policy of the United States is to be able to prevail in a nuclear war. Helen Caldicott called it nuclear madness. She said the logic of nuclear weapons, that there is a logic, and it's absolutely crazy, but it is logical. And so that was what Einstein was warning about when he told us that everything changed except the way we think. So it still is peace through strength. We can prevail. The American exceptionalism, that the American way of life is not debatable. And all of this feeds into, and then today we're looking at climate change, the number one existential threat to life on Earth with nuclear weapons, resource depletion, COVID, we're all here with our masks, safely distancing. These are all factors, destabilizing factors, and all of these factors lower the threshold to nuclear war, making it easier, more oil running out, resources running out, the climate being destabilized, resulting in more and more and more conflicts around the world. Michael Clare has written several books about it. Though his most famous was called Resource Wars. So this is where we are today. The bulletin of the atomic scientists have their famous doomsday clock. Today, it is closer to doomsday than it ever has been in 75 years. It's 100 seconds to midnight. And so that's why it's important for us to remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to hand the microphone over to Chuck. He's going to use the wipes. I'll feed the cord, and we'll go around the circle and everyone share what's on your mind.
All right, so I'll start.
Yes. I thought I'd untangled it. But...
I'm Chuck Wooldridge. Why is it still important at 75 years out? I first want to start with it being very personal. I would want to start with it being a very personal story in that since 2010, All Souls has had 4 groups of our members who have had the honor of being in Hiroshima because of the story of the Hiroshima children's drawings. And after the very first trip, the 8 of us, including the filmmakers for the documentary film, came back and we started to have a conversation about it was such a transformative experience. I mean, you cannot go to Hiroshima and put your feet in the Peace Park without being really, really touched, inspired, disturbed. It's really sacred ground. And we began to say, well, we can't go to Hiroshima and come back and that's the end of the story. We have to share that experience, and our collective view was we would like as many All Souls members, now that we were trying to restore that connection to Hankawa Elementary School and in Hiroshima, Japan, to have that chance themselves to be there. And to be an American and to be in Hiroshima is one of the most awkward places you could ever be as an American, and most Americans don't feel awkward anywhere. But this is a place where it really, really touches you. And so at the Peace Park, where the cenotaph is, where the ashes of the victims lay at rest, it is written, "May all the souls here rest in peace, for we shall not repeat this evil." And to me, that is a statement that we have personally got to take on. And we have, through two groups of All Souls members going to Hiroshima and 2 groups coming from Japan, we've developed personal relationships. And with relationship comes responsibility. And as we all know, the world is in an incredibly unstable, unpredictable place. The nuclear treaties that should be adopted globally are not being adopted. The current treaties that the United States is member to, we are probably either going to walk away from them or destabilize them incredibly. And we are living now in an incredibly, as I said, uncertain time with this global pandemic. So I think we have to, one, redouble our efforts, and also just reclaim our humanity when the United States had committed such an inhumane act in the first place. So I know everyone may not feel comfortable speaking, but if you would like to speak, I will wipe the mic down and make sure that you have a chance to do so. So if there's others who would like to share their story.
Maybe the best thing to do is to come forward. If anyone leaves, turn your candles off, put them in the bed, all right? We're going to be using them on the 8th for Nagasaki.
I was thinking as I was walking over here that when I was born, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were only 13 years ago, and it is now 75 years. And I see a lot of the people around here are also of my generation. And I think the important thing is that we make sure that the generations coming up don't think of nuclear war as some abstract thing that could not happen again. We need to keep educating every generation about the horror of it, the danger of it, and the things we need to do to prevent it from ever happening again.
Yes, hi. I'm glad everyone came out tonight on this anniversary. So my name is Jim Wagner. I'm with the Peace Movement. This is a banner that, it's a panel for the Ribbon Project, which was a planned event on the reflecting pool, the Capitol reflecting pool for Saturday, but it's since been moved to a Zoom online event. Although I may show up there with this and some other things. And John Steinbach can give you information about that if you're interested. And please don't be bashful about it. I just want to say a couple quick words. So the reasons, I've been actually a clerk of a Peace and Social Concerns Committee at my local congregation in Frederick. I was clerk for 12 years. We had a lot of these kind of events. And we also study the issue of what causes war. And it was mentioned resource wars. John mentioned some of the collateral problems we now have. I would add to that artificial intelligence too. The prospect of nuclear arsenals being under the control of artificial intelligence doesn't seem like a good scenario to me. It depends on how you program the artificial intelligence, I think. Anyway, the causes for war, I won't ramble on. I'll just say economics keeps coming back to me and others. Our competitive way of doing business. So there is a model, it's actually a cooperative principle. If you're into cooperative enterprises, it's cooperative principle number 6, cooperation amongst cooperatives. I think that offers hope for a better way of doing business. And I will add that one reason, I think the primary reason Japan attacked the United States was that we cut off their oil supply when they were island hopping in the South Pacific. So there's energy, there's lack of, being able to purchase oil elsewhere. So investing in peace, as my sign says, is not some pie in the sky thing. There are real world things we can do, such as thinking about those aspects, investing in the State Department, the U.S. Department of Peace, cultural exchanges, UNESCO. So if you'd like to speak with me about some more thoughts and get my contact information, please do. Thanks.
My name is Greg, and I went to Hiroshima in 2013, I believe it was, with my teenage daughter, and I experienced the forgiveness of the Japanese people and the destruction that the bomb caused in downtown Hiroshima. I also note that I think 24 people showed up tonight. What a small group. I think of Gideon's army, and I wonder, is it all worth it for the 12 or 24 or 30 of us who showed up. It's a struggle to be faithful when so many of our fellow Americans will show up for a political rally or a professional sporting event in many times greater numbers. So I close with wondering, is it all worth it? I'm not as hopeful as all of you.
Hello, I wasn't going to speak. I'm Denise Woods, but I had to speak because Greg spoke, and I was in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 35 years ago, and I walked from Hiroshima to Nagasaki on a peace pilgrimage. And, oh sure, I was in Hiroshima 35 years ago. We walked from Hiroshima to Nagasaki on a peace pilgrimage, only drinking water, to remember the souls that were lost that day. But I don't really want to talk about them because I feel that we need hope right now. And what I remembered when we were asked to speak was there was a man in Hiroshima and the nuclear bomb dropped on his office and he escaped. He didn't know where to go, so he went to Nagasaki. And he arrived in this community and he told them, you've got to run. There's this bomb that is going to come and explode. And it's going to destroy everything instantly, including you. And no one believed him. And they all stayed in that office building and the bomb dropped on him and everyone else. And he survived. If that doesn't give you hope, what does? Who knew here that a man survived 2 nuclear bombs? Right. This is an extraordinary story that must help us continue on during these horrifying times, because the people in Japan need us to keep on. They need us to not forget them, and they need us to be here with Greg, with all of us, doing everything we can. So thank you very much.
Inside with Shizumi's Zoom meeting and some. Okay, I'll wrap it up.
Here's the last one.
What's
This
that?
is the last graph, last one.
Okay. Jim?
I'm willing to speak. My name is Jim, and they say all politics is personal. My wife and I and my daughter had the once-in-a-lifetime, I thought it was once-in-a-lifetime privilege of visiting Japan last September, October. And we just happened to arrive before the typhoon hit. We were able to visit Tokyo and Kyoto and Takamatsu. I don't have the guts to go yet to Hiroshima or Nagasaki. I don't even have the guts to visit Ground Zero in New York from 9/11. But I was struck on many occasions by the grace of the Japanese people. When I was departing, sitting in the airplane on the tarmac, I looked out the window and saw those gentlemen with the sticks that direct the airplanes. And maybe some of you have observed this kind of thing. They They lined up in a row, and they took a very deep, long bow in respect. Not, I could tell, it was not to the pilot. It was to us, the passengers on the plane. We Americans who had dropped a bomb on their country. I was dumbstruck by the fact that I had never been so respected in my entire life within my own country. So I just wanted to share with you that I have decided at some point, if I am so lucky, I will go back to Japan and be able to swallow my horror and visit Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and to bring the good wishes of all people for peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Jim, I've known Jim for probably 35 years. He was an early member of our committee, so it's good to see him, and Kevin and Marie is gone now. As we close, I'd like us to give a warm thanks to the Hibakusha, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, who literally, from the first anniversary forward, have come together and organized and traveled all over the world to remind the people of the world of the reality and the horror of nuclear war. They believe that it is their continuing testimony, their living proof of the horrors of nuclear weapons that have prevented nuclear weapons from being used again. And now they're all in their 80s. It's very hard for them. In the pandemic, they can't come. We expect that, we hope that there will be another Hibakusha next year. Those that are able to travel were largely little children or even infants when the bomb was dropped. And increasingly, it is the children of the survivors that are coming out. And at 9:45 p.m., we'll do a candlelight vigil at 10:02. Liberty Plaza is located adjacent to the White House at 17th and G Streets Northwest. So come out at 10 o'clock and we will remember Nagasaki together. Thank you very much. Thank you, All Souls.